All right, y'all, welcome back. We are here for another episode of the ReThink podcast. My name is Cameron Friend.
My name is Ferris Watkins.
And we are here to have critical conversations about how we can use the tools of nonviolence to address the issues in our world today. And Ferris, we about to have a fire conversation with the one and only, my friend, Chris Broussard. Chris, what's going on with you, brother?
What's up, brother? How are you, man? Good to see you. And Ferris, nice to meet you, so to speak.
Hello.
I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. You know, this is the best part about Zoom, the fact we can have conversations with people all across the world. And so this is going to be a great thing. You know, we're excited, looking forward to this conversation. So, Chris, a lot of people know who you are, but just to give a little bit of background on some of the things that you're doing right now. So Chris Broussard is a Fox Sports and FS1 analyst. He is co-host of the Odd Couple radio show and podcast, also founder of the King movement as well. And obviously, Chris, you know, you're featured on shows such as First Thing First as well, Undisputed, also The Herd with Colin Cowherd. So you've done a lot of different things over the course of your life. So even before we even get into the meat of the subject, can you give us a little bit of background on even how you got involved in journalism and being an analyst, and like, you know, where that started for you, even your childhood and everything else?
Well, the first thought I ever had about being a sports writer was I was about 7 years old, and I followed sports religiously. And my father, we lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, and my father, we were all outside, and he was talking to a neighbor, both adults, and he asked me some question about sports, and I knew it. He was like, yeah, that boy know everything about sports. He gonna be a sports writer or something like that.
Wow. Come on, Professor.
And that, you know, I'm 7 years old. Now I just thought about, you know, that put it in my mind. But then, you know, it faded away. And as I'm in high school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Went to Oberlin College in Ohio, which actually was the first college in America to admit African Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. To have a policy. Yeah. It wasn't the first college where a Black person went, but it was the first one that had a policy of admitting people regardless of their race. So I went there, and I played basketball there. My sophomore year in college, I looked around, and all of my friends seemed to know what they wanted to do with their life. My teammates, you know, some of them were going to law school, and I'm talking about my African-American friends. Mm-hmm. Most of my teammates were Black. Some were going to law school. Some knew they were going to public policy school. Some were going to get their MBA. Some wanted to be engineers. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, she knew she wanted to go to medical school. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was like, man, I got to figure something out. I got scared because I was like, I have 2.5 years left before I have to become a responsible adult and take care of myself. And so I came up with a formula to figure out what I want to do with my life. And I said, I'll take something I'm gifted at, something I enjoy, which was sports, because I wanted a career that I would enjoy. So I said sports, because sports growing up, I mean, I played football, basketball, and baseball in high school, played basketball in college. So sports was really like a huge part of my life. Mm-hmm. And so I said something I enjoy plus something that I'm gifted at. And I always was a gifted writer, whether it was writing essays in school, term papers. I used to write rhymes, you know, the whole 9 yards. Like writing was just a gift that I had.
Yeah.
And so I said, let me try sports plus writing. Let me try to become a sports writer. And fortunately, I had good grades. So once I realized what I wanted to do, I had the grades to go ahead and make it a reality. And so I ended up getting a summer internship the summer after my junior year at the Cleveland Plain Dealer, which was the largest newspaper in Ohio. And it went well. And then the following summer after I graduated, I had an internship at the Indianapolis Star. And then I moved on from there and worked at the Plain Dealer for about 4 years, covering high school sports. So that's where my career began.
Wow. You mentioned coming out of school and not really being ready to step foot in the world. And that was literally the same thing that me and my friends went to. I graduated Spelman in 2019. And a lot of us were eligible to graduate early, but we just weren't ready for that. We were like, oh my God, we're not ready for the world. World, pump your brakes. Right. But this formula that you came up with, being gifted with something that you were already doing, because you were an English major, right?
I was an English major.
Yeah.
I wrote a little bit on the school newspaper. Not a ton, but I did write some.
Wow. And then, comparing that with your love of sports, like what would you say to students or young people who are kind of going through that same thing? They're kind of in this limbo phase of like, what do I do after this? Like, how do I move forward? And then still advice about getting into journalism.
Well, first of all, I would say to high school and college students to use that formula.
Yeah.
Something you're gifted at plus something you enjoy. To figure out what you want to do with your life. Because look, when you graduate from college, most of your time, or high school for those that may not go to college, most of your time will be spent working.
Yeah,
you will, I mean, really, you work more than you do anything else other than perhaps, well, not even sleep. So especially if you have a quote unquote career job, because those are a lot longer than 40 hours a week. You know, a lot of those jobs you bring home, you still work. My wife's a doctor. She's working at home a lot. I have friends that work on Wall Street. Young people that they come out of college, they get jobs on Wall Street, and they're working 90 to 120 hour weeks.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a job you enjoy, then that's a lot of time spent being miserable.
That's true.
So that's a goal, is to find a job or career that you enjoy. I think most people don't have a job that they enjoy, you know. Now, even if that's the case, you still got to get a job. All right. In some people's lot in life, you might have a job that you may not particularly enjoy, but you're putting food on your table and on your family's table. And that's a part of your purpose too, is to provide for your family. So if I had to work as a landscaper, or painting houses, which I may not have enjoyed, I still would do it if I had to provide for my family. But getting back to use that formula, something you're gifted at. We always think of gifts as being able to sing, being athletic, you know, but all of us are gifted in some way, shape, or form. I was gifted in writing. Some people are gifted in math. They just have a way with numbers. Some people are gifted in public speaking. Some people are natural born leaders. You know, some people have the gift of gab. You know, they like arguing and debating and convincing people. And so look at what your gifts are, take inventory of that, and then take inventory of the things you enjoy. Do you enjoy working with children? Maybe you want to be a teacher. You know, do you enjoy debating and like I said, convincing people? Maybe you want to be a lawyer. Do you enjoy helping other people, social work or something like that? Cards. You enjoy cooking. You could go to culinary school. Like, I would challenge the young people to say, what am I gifted at, and what do I enjoy? And think about it. Write it down. Think about it. Look at it, and then think of real life ways you can make a living doing that. You may enjoy. I mean, obviously, a lot of people enjoy sneakers. Well, there are people that design those sneakers. You know, Nike and all the other companies, Adidas, so on and so forth, they have a group of people that design sneakers. We should have far more African Americans in that field. I mean, we dominate buying the sneakers, you know, so we should have people, we have artists and people that, you know, could put together shoes and stuff. So, but that's the first thing, is think about that and what, you know, how you can make a realistic career out of that. Even if it's something like, I like video games and I like computers. Well, you could go into computer technology, or again, somebody designs those video games. The second thing is, make sure you do the best you can in school. Because like I said, when I realized what I wanted to do, I was in a position to capitalize on my dream because I had good grades. I had above a 3.0 GPA or 3.0 GPA in college. So when I went to my first interview for that internship at the Cleveland Plain Dealer, I had hardly any experience in journalism. Oberlin was a liberal arts college, so I majored in English. I didn't write that much on the school newspaper, like I said. So I hit it off with the person interviewing me. I was very active at college on various committees in addition to playing sports. So I developed my leadership skills in various other ways. That's always important. A person with a 3.0 GPA, but who's very active on campus and showing that they're a leader, that they can get along and work with other people, is more attractive than a person with a 4.0 who does nothing but study, you know, because that shows us you can work with other people. And but if I did not have good grades, then if I had a C average or a C minus or a D average, even if they would have looked at my resume or my grades and said, nah, we're not even going to consider him, especially not having much experience. So even if you don't understand yet, I'm talking mainly to the high school kids, the value of your education and why you need to study the history and the geometry and the things you may feel like, what am I going to use this for? Still do the best you can, because once you do realize what you want to do, if you've done well in school and been a good student, people are more apt to give you a chance than someone hasn't done well in school. And so that's what I would say. But as far as somebody that wants to get in journalism or broadcasting, if once you know that's what you want to do, then go all in on it. Because it's journalism and broadcasting, particularly in sports or entertainment, is incredibly competitive. And there are only so many jobs available. There are only so many, there are a handful of people, and I'm fortunate to be one, who are on television or radio, but particularly television, talking about sports. There's a handful. You could probably count them on two hands. And so it's very competitive. So if you know that's what you want to do, then get working toward that as soon as you can. And now there are all types of opportunities. You can get your own YouTube channel. You can start your own blog. You can start your own website. You can film yourself in front of the camera and practice. Practice commentating on the games, you know. So when I came out of school, if you wanted to work in journalism and you didn't get a job at a newspaper or a magazine or a radio or television station, you were in trouble. You were out of luck. You weren't going to be able to get into the field. And now there are other ways to get into the field through all the social media paths that I just mentioned. And if you become, first of all, you may be able to make money doing that just through social media. But secondly, if you get big enough, you may be able to parlay that into a career with a mainstream media outlet.
That's real. That's even just like a great lesson on capitalizing on what's around you. You know, even if you don't have the best access or the relationships, you can build it on your own with stuff that is available to you. So Chris, even transitioning into now, we in the last several years have been in a very new place when it comes to sports, especially the athletes and their responsibility and social issues. In 2018, there was a very prominent Fox host who essentially told LeBron James and Kevin Durant, based on an interview they had in a car with Kerry Champion, and they basically told them, hey, you know, you need to shut up and dribble, focus on basketball, because they were sharing their experiences about being Black men in the country, being Black men in sports, prominent athletes who are seeing the things that are happening around them and feeling a sense of responsibility to those things. So for you, with comments like that were made towards them, do you think that athletes today have an even greater social responsibility than they've had before? Or is this more a continuation with a lot of the work that Muhammad Ali and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, like that groundwork that was laid for them? Is this a continuation, or is this something new that we're seeing today?
No, it's a continuation because we've always look, I think Black athletes and entertainers would love it if we as African Americans had the luxury of just playing ball, of just being an entertainer. You know, but because of our history in this country and our current situation, we need our athletes and our entertainers to speak up on social issues. White athletes don't have to, because they have a privileged place in society, and they have plenty of other whites who are in these prominent positions who can address those issues. But I contend that the most beloved, the most the wealthiest, the most well-connected, and the most irreplaceable African Americans in the country, I'm talking about in the context of mainstream America, are Black athletes. You can't get it. I'm sorry, where's the white LeBron James? The white Cam Newton? Black dominate sports, particularly football and basketball, which are the most popular sports in America.
Yeah.
And so that, because they're irreplaceable, that gives them a leverage that most African Americans don't have. And so, as an example, if LeBron James or Russell Wilson or Patrick Mahomes had been the person that started kneeling for the anthem, you think they'd be out of the league like Colin Kaepernick was or is? No. They'd be very much in the league. It might have become a fad or a trend, who knows, among the whole league, because they're irreplaceable. I thought Colin Kaepernick actually showed more bravery than even on the we gave him credit for, because he was a second stringer at that time. He was no longer a star. They could have cut him a week or two after he started kneeling, and nobody would have thought anything of it, because he was, at that point, he was expendable.
Yeah.
And so it took a lot more courage, in my opinion, to do it when he knew he wasn't the star anymore. He could be replaced or cut. And then if he had been a superstar, even though it still would have been good. Yeah. So yeah, I think our athletes, we've always needed our athletes to speak up. I'm gonna be honest, and obviously I respect and love and treasure the work of Dr. King and the civil rights movement and all our African Americans who have fought for our freedoms in various aspects of life. But I contend, if we were not such great athletes, we would not be nearly as far along racially as we are. Wow. Even as we have a long way to go. Because the fact is, America loves its sports. And Black Americans dominate sports. And so many whites have grown up idolizing a Black athlete. And a lot of times that doesn't necessarily change their racist views toward all Black people, but our dominance of sports has to some degree endeared us to mainstream white America. And so it shouldn't be the case. Obviously, we should be respected just as human beings created in God's image. But the fact is, because America loves sports so much, and because we are so great at sports as a whole, that has enabled us to move even further along racially than we would otherwise. And I would say, to a slightly lesser degree, also entertainment. Comedians, acting, and things like that. Musicians, obviously. So I believe it's a continuation. We've always needed our athletes to speak up. Now, and it's been a roller coaster, right? In the 60s, you mentioned Muhammad Ali, Bill Russell, Jim Brown, so on and so, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Lou Alcindor at that time, and others speaking out. Oscar Robertson, who brought about free agency in the NBA. Kurt Flood, who started free agency for all athletes. Like, they didn't just do great things for African Americans, although that was key. They also did them for all athletes because they stood up. But so you had that activism. And then in late 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, it was kind of quiet. Michael Jordan, Jerry Rice, Lawrence Taylor, the Black athletes weren't really speaking out nearly as much. Mike Tyson. And now in this generation is back up to where athletes have become outspoken again. And I think what it speaks to is the overt racism versus the covert racism. So in the 60s, overt racism was still very much in your face. I mean, so just being a man with some dignity, you were challenged to speak out, because, man, I can't keep, look at what happened. Look at this, look at that. I got to speak out. In the 80s, it was obviously still very much racism going on, but it was a little more covert and not in our face as much. Although in the 90s, you had the Rodney King situation and all of the riots there. And then obviously lately with Trayvon Martin, which is one of the things that sparked this whole new revolution among the athletes. Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, we could go on and on, unfortunately. These are things that are very much in your face. And so, and then the last presidency was a lot of, coming off of Obama. So I think that's what sparked the athletes to be much more outspoken in this generation. And what I'll say is I think that should be a lesson for the African-American community in general, because I feel like, unfortunately, sometimes we go, like, when we see as a whole, not just athletes, but Black people as a whole, when we see overt racism, then we always speak out, we march, we complain, we fight for legislation, whatever it may be. But I think a lot of times when we don't see overt racism, we relax.
Yep.
And we need to be building constantly. I'm talking about building up ourselves economically, building up ourselves educationally as a whole, not just individually, that too. But we can't relax. If we don't, like, that's one thing I was saying with this last election. Okay, people want to get Trump out of there, but now that he's out of there, don't relax.
Yeah.
Racism existed long before Donald Trump. And so people made him the boogeyman of racism. Yeah, it was issues there, but believe me, before him, after him, we still need to be building and pushing. And I think that can be a ploy used against us. Oh, just get Donald Trump out of there. Oh, just get, Derek Chauvin convicted and everything's okay. No, we still need to be building. And even when it's quote unquote quiet, we need to be building and working and making sure we get full justice and equality in this society.
Yeah. It's kind of like, this notion of like, oh, I'm just going to work to get this certain amount of money. And then once I get that, I can stop working. But you're still going to need that money to sustain yourself. Same thing that goes on with our society. Like, when a problem hits us, we can't just react. We have to continuously perpetuate this notion that we are still the minority. Even though we're the majority in most situations, we're still treated as the minority. But on the reverse end, right? Because we see outwardly those players and how they're actively doing that, being activists for us. But on the back end, in terms of the media, what is that like for you to talk about these issues? Like, when you see them, is it like, oh man, like I want to talk about this? Or is it more so like, man, like that's a tough subject and I really don't want to speak on it right now? Or maybe I have to put me on air right now, I need to say something. How is that like? What is that like for you?
Well, for me, just as an African-American my family history is to be very active in situations. My grandparents were very active in the NAACP down in Louisiana. My father, marched in some of the civil rights movements. And I was raised to be very pro-Black, not anti-white, but pro-Black, And so for me, and reading a lot of Black history and African history and African-American history, that's just something that I feel is important. And for me as a person, whether I was in the media or not, trying to help uplift African-American people and improve our quality of life in this country is very important to me just individually. Okay. So now, because I'm in the media, I have a platform, a national platform by which I can do that. And I tell you, obviously I'm in sports, but the thing about sports is that race comes up in sports all the time. So because race comes up in sports, you have the opportunity to speak about it a lot. And so I do get a chance, whether it's on my radio show or on television, to speak about racism. I've spoken on colorism, police brutality, colorism within the Black community, police brutality, whether or not we should use the N-word, images presented, about us on me, like those and more, those things and more. I've had the opportunity to speak about on sports television talk shows. And so it's a great opportunity to address these issues. Now, I understand my job is a sports broadcaster. So I'm not speaking about race every day. Yeah. Because people want to hear me talk about sports. And so obviously that's the primary thing we talk about. But as I said, because these issues inject themselves into sports all the time, because so many of the athletes are Black, I do get an opportunity to speak about these issues when it's even in the sports context. and it's appropriate. Nobody can say, oh, he's forcing that in there. No, this is what the story of the day is.
Yeah.
And then outside of my job, I do things in the community as well.
Yeah.
You know what's, and I think that's one of the things that we most appreciate about you, Chris. And obviously, I've known you for some time now, and I've heard you speak numerous times. And whether it be addressing stuff that's happening directly in society, or even comments that have been made. The incident with the new coach at UNC and the comments that he made about him and his wife.
That's a prime example. That
you know what I mean?
All sorts of discussions.
Exactly. And so the moment called for it, though. And also on your basketball takes. I mean, you're one of the few that has stood up for Nikola Jokic and getting the MVP award and all that other stuff. So you obviously you've done a lot of different things, a lot of different conversations. But obviously in 2020, as we have seen the pandemic and racial unrest and political turmoil, the WNBA, especially in the NBA, they really took a strong stance against racism, white supremacy, systemic racism, things having to do with on the court, whether it be at the bubble when the Milwaukee Bucks walked off of the court, refused to take the court because of what happened to Jacob Blake and shooting in Wisconsin. How do you feel that the leagues have responded, whether it be the MLB, whether it be the NFL, whether it be the WNBA, NBA, Wimbledon, whatever? How do you feel like the leagues have responded to the moment and what requires of us? But also, if you have some things that you would like to see done with the NBA especially, or the NFL especially, what would you like to see done on top of the things they've already done?
Well, I think some of the leagues, particularly the basketball leagues, the WNBA and NBA, have done a good job. And NFL's been pretty good too, on a certain level. They've obviously listened to their athletes and let their athletes address these issues. Both individually on their, not let them, because they can do what they want on their social media and all that, but the leagues have supported them. And then even the leagues have, put their athletes out there in positions to speak on it. And the NBA, obviously, with the Black Lives Matter on the court and the HBCU designs and stuff on the court in the bubble and all of that, there's been some good things done, of course. But that's also a lot of symbolism. And I think we as African Americans can't fall for symbolism, because there's a lot, I think, in just society in general, there's a lot of giving us little symbolic things like, promoting the phrase Black Lives Matter. Or, even now the Summer of Soul movie that's being promoted, which is great. I want to see that and all that. But these things are good, but that is not, we cannot fall for that and be like, oh, wow, look at all the Black people on this show, or they're actually speaking about racism on the show. Well, let's get to the crux of the matter. And Dr. King got to the crux of the matter in this before he died. White Americans, or white people in this country, they got tangible financial rewards and benefits from racism.
Wow.
Phrases, apologies, documentaries, exhibits at museums, that's all well and good, and that's nice. That's not going to make up for the racism that we've suffered in this country.
That's real.
You got tangible financial benefits that still have you light years ahead of where we are. And many of our people are still suffering financially. So it's going to take tangible financial benefits to really get past this matter of racism, which I think all Black people would like to do. And I think many white people would like to do, but that's what it's going to take. So putting Black Lives Matter on the court, that's nice, but we can't be fooled and just say, wow, look at that. That was great. The NBA is really woke. And the NBA is ahead of the other sports for sure, and the WNBA, but it's more than that. So for instance, some of the things I like to see, look, I would like to see every owner in the NBA that owns a team, the businesses that made you wealthy and that you run, start a management trainee program for Black college graduates, with the goal being that within a 5-10 year period, 15-year period, whatever it may be that is agreed upon, that roughly 13% of your executive class is African American.
Wow.
How about that? That's a tangible, because we have evidence. As much as people may want to hate the word quota, and Dr. King with Operation Breadbasket pushed this and led to affirmative action, we have evidence that as a whole, whites will tend to only hire African Americans in representative numbers when they have to.
Wow.
When they are forced to. Now, on the playing field, the football field, the boxing ring, the track, the basketball court, the baseball diamond, that's a meritocracy. I mean, you put two dudes in the ring, whichever one's best, it's just going to be obvious, right? You put two people in the track, whoever best is going to be obvious. And if I don't pick the best person, regardless of his race, then I'm going to be out of a job because I have to win. That's my job.
Exactly.
So we'll pick black athletes on the field. But look at the NFL, 70% black, and yet they have very few black coaches and even fewer black general managers. And they are hiring white coaches and GMs who don't have, who are so far underqualified compared to many of the black coaches they're passing over. Why? Because a lot of people can be a GM. I'm not saying it's easy and all that. A lot of, you can't find, like I said, a lot of people can't do what Cam Newton can do, what Lamar Jackson can do, what, DeAndre Hopkins can do. But a lot of people can be a front office executive, and even coaching, as specialized as these jobs are, they're not as specialized as being an athlete. So I'll give you an example. You two could come into to interview with me, and one of you is white, one of you is black. The black person's more qualified, but the white person could do it too. You're good. You're not quite as qualified, quite as good, but you could do it. I could just hire the white person. And it's a good hire. They look like they could do it, but I passed you over even though you were more qualified. And that's what's happening in these sports, particularly in the NFL. And so I think that's what, and it happens in corporate America too, because corporate America is not a true meritocracy like the playing field is. And so that's why only 3%, we make up 13% of the American population, only 3% of the executive class in senior leadership positions in corporations in America are African Americans. And only 0.8% of CEOs at Fortune 500 companies are African Americans.
Wow.
They're not going to hire us unless they're pushed to and pressured to. And so it could start with the NBA because it's 75% black. Those athletes are irreplaceable. And you can hold the owner's feet to the fire and be like, look, we want y'all to start a management trainee program at your corporation that you own. And in 10 years, we want 13% of the management class to be African American or close. And so those are that's one thing. I would also like to see our athletes link up more with economists, educators, and lawyers to talk about what are some real tangible ways they can benefit. They can use not only their wealth, not even primarily their wealth, but their connections. McDonald's wants the black athlete to endorse their product. Nike wants the black athlete to endorse their product. How can I use that to help the masses of black people? And it doesn't even have to just be linking up with black economists and civil rights leaders and educators and accountants and lawyers. I mean, yes, primarily, but also white economists who know this is what really needs to be done to help the black community. I think it's good that LeBron James and Jalen Rose and other athletes are starting schools. That's a great example. I would like to see many athletes, and LeBron used his leverage where it didn't all come out of his pocket. He used his connections and all these corporations in the city of Akron that wants to be connected to LeBron James. And he said, all right, build this school. So Steph could do that. Draymond could do that. Patrick Mahomes could do, like, we could do things like that. So we need to begin thinking not just as individuals, but as a mass, unique, as one group of people.
Yeah.
Because when something negative happens, we come together like one, right? But then when it's peacetime, so to speak, we own our individual thing. I'm gonna get mine. That's the American mindset. But we as African Americans can't have that individualistic mindset completely. Obviously, we all want and need our individualism, but we need to think as a group of people.
Yeah.
Like, what if Frederick Douglass had thought like an individual only? What if
we'll be here?
Sojourner Truth, right, had just taught as an individual only?
Yeah.
And said, I'm free, I'm good. Forget all them. You know, no, they came back and fought for the rights of their people. I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah. So you talk a lot about what we do or what we need to do to empower those who are coming after us and to help our world as a whole. And you are literally doing that with your foundation. Can you talk a little bit about that and how my uncle, and I refer to him as Uncle and Mel, so you hear me say that, that's what we say. But how has my Uncle and Mel and my Aunt Coretta, how have they impacted you in your foundation?
Well, yeah. First, I guess I'll talk about the foundation first, and then the influence of Uncle ML or Dr. King. I would say, first of all, like the King movement, it's a national men's movement. It stands for knowledge, inspiration, and nurture through God. Yeah. And our goal is to help men become all that God created them to be in every aspect of life. And so some of the things we focus on are helping men become the husbands, the fathers, the leaders, the citizens that God created us to be. We do many more things, but that's a focus on the family. Okay. And I do think we need to really heighten our focus on the family, you know, because without strong families, you can't have a strong people. Yeah. That's the most foundational institution in humanity, is the family. And so we can't, like, when we fight for our rights and equality and justice, we also have to simultaneously be building up our families. Yeah. And I'm talking about the nuclear family. And I know there's this notion that the nuclear family isn't Black and it's westernized and all this. Well, if you believe the Bible, the nuclear family was Adam and Eve. And that's what God created. And that was in Africa. Genesis even talks about it being located in, you know, the land that encompasses Ethiopia and the Nile, the Blue and Nile River right there. Egypt was a great, tremendous African civilization built on the nuclear family. So don't believe the hype, even if it's coming from Black people, that the nuclear family is not Black. Okay, so just as in biology, it took me and my wife to create our children. And so it's going to take me and my wife to raise our children to the optimum. And so, not that other forms of family shouldn't be supported, but we do have to focus on family. And so that's one thing we do with the King movement. We're trying to build up strong Black families and strong Black fathers to be strong Black leaders in our communities and our families. So that's one thing we do. But as far as Dr. King, one of the things that sticks out to me most about him was his courage. And I think a lot of times people try to put him and Malcolm X on opposite sides, right, of, you know, the spectrum, and say Martin did it this way, Malcolm did it this way. And people tend to look at Malcolm as the stronger one, you know, because Dr. King was nonviolent and preached nonviolence, and Malcolm preached self-defense. And I respect and love and honor both of them. But when you really look at it, I mean, Dr. King is the one that went into the halls of power. And he spoke truth to power. And that a lot of times takes more courage than to stand on the sidelines and rail against what is wrong and speak out against what's wrong, but you're not really encountering the system. You're talking about it on the outside, and you may be correct, and Malcolm was correct about a lot of it, but he never really engaged it. Dr. King actually went into the system where he knew at times he was hated and spoke the truth. He spoke the truth to Lyndon Johnson. Do this for Black people or else. That's courage. And that's tough. And so his courage, his sacrifice, obviously he sacrificed his life, for African-American people. So that is a lesson right there to not just, he could have easily just said, I'm just going to be a middle-class Black preacher and had a nice little career in ministry, but he sacrificed his individual comforts as Moses did in Egypt, right? And he went and tried to help his people get free. And so those are a couple things. And then finally, like I said, people always want to quote the I have a dream speech, and particularly white people, and let's judge people by the content of their character, and all of that was true and that was good. But after that, you'll notice Dr. King focused a lot on economics. And he even said, we're going to Washington and we want them to cut the check. You know what I'm saying? Like, so he saw that you can't just, you have to meet the economic needs of African-American people. And that's all over. Even America understood that when they initially promised us 40 acres and a mule. They understood you can't just, you're free. Okay, now what? We don't have land, we don't have homes, we don't have, money. So now then that's why African Americans had to essentially go right back into sharecropping, many of us, and so we have never been given anything like that. That's what I'm talking about, the tangible financial benefits. And so Dr. King pushed that, and that's when a lot of people really turned against him, including some African Americans. And so just those are some of the things I've learned from him. Those are some of the things that impact the King movement. And so,
Well, Chris, we appreciate you making the time for us today. I mean, this has been an amazing conversation. I mean, I know that I've learned a lot. I think the people that are going to be listening to it are going to benefit from this tremendously. Again, Chris Broussard, how can people check you out, by the way? So when we leave this conversation, how can people check you out to follow your work?
Well, on social media, you can follow me at Chris_Broussard on Twitter, Chris Broussard 68 on Instagram. I'm a great follow too. But if you're interested in having me speak, I speak at churches and schools and corporations throughout the country. You could go to chrisbroussardspeaks.com, chrisbroussardspeaks.com. To learn more about the King movement, you can check out our website at kingmovement.com, or you can email us at king@kingmovement.com to get more information.
For sure. Well, wonderful. You all, this is a great episode. Thank wonderful conversation. Much. Hey, ReThink podcast. We'll be back soon. We'll see y'all later.